August 19th, 1966. The air over Niterói shimmered with heat, a slow metallic haze rising from the bay. From a distance, Morro de Vintem looked peaceful, just another green hill crouched beneath the sun. Yet something in that stillness felt wrong, as if the landscape itself were holding its breath. A young boy climbed the slope to chase his kite. What he found instead stopped him cold. Two men lay stretched among the rocks side by side, faces covered with strange metallic masks. Their suits were tidy, raincoats buttoned, shoes polished. The boy stared, confused by how calm the scene appeared. Two sleepers in the open, untouched by chaos. Then he ran. Within an hour, police and reporters swarmed the hillside. Cameras flashed, notebooks filled with guesses. The heat pressed down like a weight. The smell of salt and ozone mixed with the sweet decay of grass. The investigators circled the bodies. No blood, no bruises, no sign of struggle. Only the faint reflection of daylight sliding over the lead masks. Each man carried a towel, a bottle of mineral water, and a small notebook wrapped in plastic. Inside, a single page bore a message written in precise, almost ritual handwriting. Be at the arranged place at 4:30. Take the capsules. After the effect, protect the metals. Await signal, mask. No context, no explanation. Just a sequence of instructions that sounded more like a code than a plan. Their names emerged soon after: Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel José Viana, technicians from the northern town of Campos dos Goitacazes. Both were respected, quiet, skilled with radios and circuits. They had told their families they were traveling to buy electronic parts. Instead, they ended here, on a hill overlooking the bay, staring eternally into nothing through masks of lead. As night fell, the journalists' flashbulbs died one by one. The hillside sank into silence again. But the question remained, heavy as the metal on those faces. What could make two men prepare so carefully for death, or for something beyond it? By dawn, the story had already crossed the bay. Newspapers printed the headline, "The Men in the Lead Masks," and by morning, the hill had turned into a magnet for speculation. What began as a small note in the police log was now the biggest mystery in Rio. Investigators retraced the final days of Manuel and Miguel. They left Campos carrying a brown paper package, telling their families they were going to buy electronic components. Instead of returning that evening, they vanished into the city. A bus driver later remembered them sitting in silence, staring out the window as if watching something that only they could see. At a small bar near the foot of Morro do Vintem, a waiter recalled their last stop. They ordered 2 bottles of soda, drank slowly, and asked the man to keep the caps for them. He thought it was a joke, until one of them looked up and said quietly, "It has to be done exactly on time." Then they paid, thanked him, and walked into the mist. That night, thunder rolled over Niterói. Locals reported a strange glow above the hill, a flicker of blue light that lingered too long to be lightning. Some said it pulsed like a machine. Others said it hummed. Back in Campos, police entered their workshop. On the wooden table lay soldering irons, coils of copper, half-cut sheets of lead. The smell of metal still clung to the air. A neighbor told detectives the two men had been experimenting with spiritual frequencies. Another said they belonged to a small circle of radio enthusiasts who studied waves beyond human hearing. The detectives filled notebooks with contradictions. The physical evidence spoke of science. The testimonies whispered of faith. Somewhere between those two worlds, the truth hid its face. Days later, experts concluded there was no poison, no radiation, no visible cause of death. Yet the men's careful preparation, the raincoats, the lead masks, the written note, suggested absolute intention. Whatever they were doing, they expected an outcome. As one investigator wrote in his final report, they climbed that hill expecting to see something magnificent. They may have seen it. We did not. The investigation turned into an open wound for the authorities. Every clue seemed to contradict the last. The forensic team could not find poison, and no injuries marked the bodies. Yet the men had clearly prepared for something precise. An event timed to the minute. Their notebooks revealed patterns of numbers, equations, and sketches of circuits. The handwriting grew erratic near the final pages, as if written in haste. Among the symbols, one line stood out in clean, careful script. After the effect, "Protect the metals." What effect? What metals? No one could tell. Detectives traced their movements through the city. They discovered that 2 days before their deaths, the men bought the lead sheets from an industrial supply store and cut them themselves. The masks were not decorative. They were purposeful. Handmade, designed to block light or radiation. A friend from campus described their growing obsession with radio transmissions and invisible waves. They believed that human consciousness could align with higher energy fields. It was the 1960s. The Cold War had turned technology into both miracle and myth. Across the world, radios hummed with rumors of UFOs, secret experiments, and frequencies that could bend the mind. The police tried to fit the story into logic. Maybe the men had inhaled gas or overdosed on medication. But autopsies found nothing toxic. Others suggested suicide. Yet there were no signs of despair, no farewell notes, no ritual markings. When investigators interviewed a local spiritualist, she spoke with unsettling calm. They went there to see a great light. The masks were to protect their eyes. A week later, technicians from the crime lab returned to the hill at night. They carried Geiger counters, cameras, and lanterns. The devices worked fine until they approached the exact spot where the bodies had been found. Then for a few seconds, every light flickered. The men stood there surrounded by mist and silence. No sounds but the crickets and the distant hum of the bay. No answers, only the strange certainty that whatever happened on that hill wasn't finished yet. The report filed that night was brief and cautious. Magnetic interference recorded. No physical anomaly detected. Atmosphere unstable. The public demanded explanations. Scientists offered theories. Priests offered prayers. None of them fit. And so, 2 technicians became symbols of curiosity, of faith, of a question left hanging in the humid air of Brazil's strangest mystery. Days turned into weeks, but the case refused to fade. People climbed Morro do Vintém searching for answers, as if the wind itself could whisper what had happened there. The grass where the bodies once lay was scorched in uneven patches, darker than the soil around it. Some said it was from decomposition. Others claimed it looked more like a burn. Witnesses continued to emerge. A young woman from the nearby neighborhood told reporters she had seen a strange light in the sky the night the men died. It wasn't lightning, she said. It moved slowly, then stopped, suspended above the hill for several minutes before vanishing without a sound. Police dismissed her story at first, but others came forward with similar accounts. Farmers, fishermen, even a retired soldier. Each described the same blue glow, as if the sky had opened for a brief moment. Meanwhile, the autopsy results remained inconclusive. No radiation, no poison, no mechanical cause of death. It was as if their bodies had simply powered down. Journalists began linking the case to UFO sightings. Headlines called it the cosmic experiment and the contact that failed. Radio shows debated theories ranging from government tests to spiritual ascension. The truth no longer mattered as much as the myth. The investigators, exhausted, kept digging. One of them, Inspector Sampaio, wrote in his notebook, they believed in something greater than themselves. Whether it was science, faith, or madness, they died following a purpose. The city of Niterói grew restless. Rumors spread that the hill was cursed, that compasses malfunctioned there, that birds avoided flying over it. By the 3rd week, police had stopped patrolling the area entirely, but people still came. Scientists, mystics, thrill-seekers, all drawn by the same invisible force. Underneath the noise, one detail remained silent and unresolved: the capsules. No pills or containers were ever found. Yet the men had clearly written about taking them. What if the capsules weren't drugs at all? What if take the capsules meant activating something? A frequency, a device, a state of mind? The question lingered like a static hum, impossible to turn off. When dusk fell, the hill looked ordinary again. But for those who stood there long enough, the shadows seemed to shift differently, as if carrying echoes of the 2 men who once waited for a signal that never came. Or perhaps one that did. Weeks passed, and official reports began to fade from the headlines. But for those who had seen the scene on the hill, forgetting wasn't an option. The photographs of the two men, lying side by side under that indifferent sky, had carved themselves into the public's imagination. Inspector Sampaio, the lead investigator, refused to close the file. He spent nights revisiting evidence, the masks, the note, the water bottle, searching for meaning in the details. Every object was chosen for a reason, he told a colleague. Even the towels. You don't bring towels to die. He returned to Campos to speak again with the families. The wives of the two men, still in mourning, described their husbands as methodical and curious. They were fascinated by the invisible, electricity, magnetism, energy fields. Miguel often said that technology and the spirit world were two sides of the same signal. In the final week of their lives, both had withdrawn from friends. Speaking of an experiment that would prove what science had refused to see, at the small workshop where they had built radios, Sampaio found a wall covered in notes, frequencies, symbols, sketches of coils and antennae. It looked less like a laboratory and more like a map of obsession. Among the papers was a letter never sent, written in Miguel's hand. The time is near. We will receive the light. Do not fear for us. The test is sacred. The inspector read it twice and folded it away. The handwriting was steady, not delusional. Whatever drove them, it wasn't madness. It was conviction. By then, new rumors spread through Niterói. Some said a secret military experiment was taking place near the coast. Others insisted the men had been lured into a spiritual ritual gone wrong. A few even whispered that they had succeeded in what they sought, crossing a boundary no one else could follow. The press eventually moved on, but Sampaio didn't. He kept visiting the hill, sometimes alone, sometimes with his team. Each time he noticed how quiet it was up there. No birds, no breeze, just that heavy stillness, as if the place itself remembered something it couldn't say. In his final report he wrote, "We may never learn what those men believed they would find, but I know this. They went willingly. They prepared for an encounter, and whatever came for them, they met it without fear." The file was marked unsolved, but the story, once released into the world, refused to rest. Decades passed. The city changed. The road to Morro do Vintém filled with houses and noise, but the hill itself remained quiet, untouched, a patch of earth that refused to explain itself. The case of the lead masks became a story told in low voices, passed between journalists, students, and wanderers chasing forgotten mysteries. Every few years, someone would climb the hill and claim to feel something, a pulse beneath the ground, a pressure in the air, as if the place still held a charge from that night in 1966. In the archives of Niterói, the official file sits in a metal drawer, yellowed photographs, typed pages, a map with faded ink. The label reads simply unresolved. And yet, even there, in the dust of bureaucracy, the story refuses to die. Modern research has revisited the evidence. Some believe the men were experimenting with electromagnetic fields, possibly using frequencies that disrupted the body's natural rhythm. Others suggested a mix of drugs and faith, a ritual to open perception. But the most haunting theory was also the simplest, that they were waiting for a signal, and that in some way it came. At night from the bay, you can still see the faint line of the hill against the lights of the city. Nothing special, nothing visible, but people who stop there for a moment often describe the same sensation. An invisible hum, like a radio tuned between stations. Perhaps that's what they were chasing, not aliens, not divinity, but a sound, a frequency that promised to make sense of everything. A bridge between the known and the unknown. If so, they found it. The tragedy of the lead masks is not that two men died without answers, but that they died believing the answers were close enough to touch. As the investigator once wrote before closing his last report, some mysteries are not meant to be solved. They are meant to remind us how little we understand. The hill still watches the city in silence. The wind moves through the grass, and the ground whispers its one remaining truth, that the line between science and faith, reason and wonder, life and what lies beyond it, is thinner than lead.